Fine. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
You said growth is a system. What does that mean?
When I think about what growth is, often when I show up to a team and they ask me to grow something, they have something very specific in mind. But what I found kind of over probably 10, 15 years of doing growth for different products of all kinds is growth has to be something that happens in every aspect of what the team does. It's not one tactic. It's a way a team operates. It's the way you build a team. It's the tactics you deploy. It's the way investment decisions are made. How I think about growth is really that it's a way of building. It's not a specific effort. And so I've been at several different companies where growth is, let's run a marketing campaign. But if that marketing campaign doesn't convert, if it doesn't retain users, that marketing campaign is useless. You have to really think about the full experience of what you're trying to do when you try to grow something. That's getting in front of people, getting them to decide to use your product, and then keep using it for as long as you can keep them around is really the kind of thing. And there's not just one thing that does that. You really have to kind of create an ecosystem around how you nurture that, about how you develop that, about how you're constantly improving that. And so when I say growth as a system, that's really what I mean is it's not just one thing, it's actually how you do everything.
So does that go beyond product or?
Oh yeah. Like the way I really think about growth is that the best growth is at the intersection of product, marketing, and sales and partnership. You need all three legs of the tripod to really work, to really kind of maximize growth. And what I see often is teams think about it being marketing or sales. But if you don't have that product aspect, you don't control the experience of what it's like to convert in the product or to get the kind of onboarding or activation you need to really stick around in that product. And so the way I've tried to grow products and build growth teams is to really think about how do you kind of create those three legs of the tripod and how do you make them great, each in their own, but then the sum is greater than the parts.
I want to go deep on the product aspect.
Sure.
What does the product and growth execution loop look like? If there's like an ideal loop that you kind of think about, and if you could share some examples of.
Yeah, totally. So I spent 10 years at Facebook, and like a lot of my thoughts on growth are really informed by how Facebook approached growth, and particularly how one of the leaders at Facebook, a guy named Alex Schultz, brought in a culture of growth to Facebook. And it's a pretty simple process. It's kind of dumb when you say it, but it's understand, identify, and execute. And so when you're going after a problem, when you're thinking about growth and growing a product, you're really trying to figure out, okay, where are we trying to go? What are we trying to grow? Let me just take an example. Mercury, we're trying to grow the number of active customers. These are the people that are actively having transactions on Mercury, finding value in it, and that sort of thing. So you understand where you are, kind of how you got to there. And then you're really understanding where you're trying to go. Are you trying to grow by 10%, 2x, 10x, that sort of thing? Because you have to have a clear aspect of where you're going. Then you have to bring in the user journey. Where do you discover people? How do they show up? How do they convert? How do they retain? I've talked about some of those pieces already, but we start with a deep understanding. Where are we trying to go? How do you end up with users in that position where they're contributing to growth? From there, we really try to break down in a intellectually honest but objective way. What are the things and levers that we could actually pull that would move the needle on this? If we get 100 more people to show up, nothing else changes. What's it going to look like? How many are going to convert? How many are going to retain? And what does that in number add up to that ladders up back to that actives growth that we care about? And then you have to execute incredibly well. Think if you're at a startup or if you're at really any company and it takes 3 months to get signal on your decision that you made 3 months ago, it's a total waste of time. And so it's kind of the combination of having a deep understanding where you're trying to go, what the funnel looks like to there, the options that you have and trying to objectively stack rank them, and then executing in a quick and decisive cadence so that you can get an iteration loop going so that you actually start to build on what you're learning and developing. Most people think that, there's one growth win that's just going to move the needle, but often it's one theme of growth that you find that is a key lever that you just go back to over and over and over and find a million different ways of pulling that lever that really unlocks growth, and you see the scale of growth. And I've seen that kind of classically across Mercury, across WhatsApp, across different products at Facebook. there's no other way of describing it other than it's a system of growth that really kind of finds the thing that matters to grow a product and then moves that.
So if I understand correctly, find that one lever in your product that you can kind of go back to. It's the core value of the product. And then go back to it a million different ways. And you can grow the product through that lever multiple times.
Yeah. Essentially, like, sometimes there are multiple levers and you can actually do multiple things to grow a product, but far too often there is one thing that matters the most. And people are looking for, there's, this other thing that we should go try. No, you need to go back to the core thing. You need to maximize it. And if you've maximized it, then maybe you can start to think about other things. But, I've often found that when you find that kind of core insight that grows a product, there's just always work to kind of keep doing on it. And you can tell when you've reached the end of it, when you're shipping stuff and it's not moving at all. You're trying to be aggressive and you're not moving at all. You hit diminishing returns at some point on kind of the core levers, but it's often far later than anyone else thinks it is. Every company always thinks, oh no, we've like kind of figured out growth, but they never have. There's always something that is core to how that product is growing that we can improve and accelerate growth on. And then once we've done that, we can go on and focus on some different things. But that's like kind of my core philosophy.
So you helped add 1 billion users to WhatsApp on the growth team. What was the culture like? Did you guys still obsess over finding that key lever? Did you guys ever feel like, we still need to put a system in place? What was the culture like when you were there?
Yeah. So I joined WhatsApp in 2017. They had about 1.5 billion users. And, they had already built an incredibly retentive and growing product. They didn't need any of my help getting to 1.5 billion users. And they had already been acquired. It was, a product that was really, really growing. But I was one of the first people that really worked on growth for WhatsApp, which is quite interesting. There was no data team. There was no real growth team. And so I was one of kind of the first people from Facebook to go try to help with some of these things. And it was fascinating because I had come from Facebook, incredibly data-driven, incredibly experimental, always willing to kind of change core parts of the product to see what happens. WhatsApp had such a clear vision and how they wanted to go do it that it was totally different. I actually, for the first 6 months, really didn't have much to do. It was kind of crazy and no one wanted to hear any of my thoughts about how to grow WhatsApp. And they were kind of right. It was already growing incredibly well. And so I treat it like I was a student of growth. And I really tried to study, how did WhatsApp get to where it is? And kind of the core idea of WhatsApp, and really there was a couple of things that laddered up to WhatsApp getting to that scale, was the shift of people onto mobile apps. The shift of internet networks from 2G to 3G to 4G, where internet started to get a lot more reliable. And then WhatsApp discovering that the reliability of messages and the data, the marginal cost of data, as opposed to the marginal cost of an SMS, was a dynamic in the business that could just accelerate. And so, WhatsApp had built an incredible product that works all over the world, and they had distributed it largely through kind of app stores, app networks, word of mouth. But then they had also found this lever that most people don't know about, which is they went to all the carriers around the world and they got 0 rating, which meant that your WhatsApp messages were sent for free. And the reason the carriers did this was because they were trying to switch people from phone plans and SMS plans to data plans, because they kind of could see that the data plans were going to grow infinitely, and they could kind of like increase the cost or average customer value over time. So they aligned their incentives with a key partner. That worked incredibly well. By the time I got to WhatsApp, there were somewhere in the range of 50 to 100 countries where WhatsApp was more than 90% of the population. And when you get to 90% of the population on a messaging app, you've won. That's like, truly how WhatsApp viewed it, was you get the network effects at 90% and you kind of just are going to get any other user that comes online, gets a phone and that sort of thing. And so I really started to understand WhatsApp through this broader lens of how did WhatsApp get to where it was? But that doesn't mean that the skills of like data and growth aren't like worth it at all, because not every country was in that place for WhatsApp. And we looked at some markets, I don't think I can say which ones, and saw that some of those markets were not even really kind of close to 90%. There was a lot of competition in messaging with iMessage, with Telegram, with some other providers there. And so what we looked at is what are the dynamics for an individual user that leads them to stick around? And it turns out, much like any product, I stole the Facebook 10 friends in 14 days. But if you have friends on WhatsApp, if you open your contact list and there are people on WhatsApp, you are more likely to use WhatsApp. And so for the users that sign up for WhatsApp, don't use WhatsApp, how can we get them a couple of people that are on WhatsApp and make that experience as great as possible. And so, you take that kind of same insight about users show up, they don't retain, what could we do to those users? You look at what's correlated with that. And what we found was, okay, let's try to get you a couple of people to talk on WhatsApp when you're in one of these countries. And so we really leaned into inviting. And, we tried to think about all the ways you could enter that experience of the first time of using WhatsApp and inviting someone. And one of the things that we found was, you put a big invite screen on the front page, the kind of like classic big button. It's a very Facebook tactic at doing it. No one really clicks on it. Didn't really matter. But if you went into the search bar and you searched for someone that was on your contact list, but wasn't on WhatsApp, and we put a little invite button next to that, that became the top way people invited. Because when you're on WhatsApp, you're in this experience where you don't see anyone. You go search, is this person on WhatsApp? And then there's an invite button that kind of meets your need. All of a sudden you have someone that you can bring into WhatsApp. And that was like a huge lever for some of these countries and how we could go develop it. And I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but that's like the product piece of the WhatsApp experience. We also had to pair that with the marketing and partnerships that would get WhatsApp in front of people in these markets so that they could consider that. And so the combination of those two things, where the product experience is better, you're more likely to get someone on WhatsApp that you can talk to, and we're supercharging that with marketing and partnerships, that kind of really started to accelerate some of this. And we actually tipped a couple of countries because of that, and we're able to kind of accelerate a bit. And so when we talk about WhatsApp growing by 1 billion users, a ton of that was all the work that was done 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of a constant acceleration of that. But in a product like WhatsApp, you're hitting S curves all the time, where you reach a country, you get to 90%. There's really not another, 100 million people to go get in that country. So you have to go kind of focus on the next S curve. And that was how we thought about some focusing on the next S curve, is like, hey, there's actually a segment that's working incredibly well for. Let's go focus on the segment that's not. And then let's go figure out the tactics we can do across product marketing and partnerships to really go drive that. And that was kind of some of what I learned about both how WhatsApp has a core product focus, but also how some of these things around data and growth can still work in a context where like that's not been used. And that maybe is some of what I learned from WhatsApp. Can go on some different things there if you're interested, but like, the maniacal focus from Jan on the experience of the user was something that was truly like enlightening and inspiring. I had never seen someone care so much about what one person experiences when they open the app. But he obsessed about it. 10 years in, a couple $1 billion later.
Is it okay to ask you about competition?
Sure.
For WhatsApp? Because I wanna ask, like, were you always competing with like SMS, or was there like, we were taking on like Telegram head on, or like a different app? And was it always like either we capture a market from SMS, or like that's not our market?
So, I mean, WhatsApp is a product that existed since 2008. And when I joined, it was 2017. So it'd been around for 10 years. And, there were, as I was like kind of trying to dig through the history of WhatsApp, I was really trying to understand like, what is the history of how this product kind of won in these markets? Because it's not just as simple as like what I described. There was a ton of competition. And it was SMS for sure, particularly in places that were more developed on networks like the US. But there were other markets like Indonesia where there was Line, there was BlackBerry messaging, there was Facebook Messenger. And those were all kind of in the early 2010s going head to head on all these things. And at the time, and really kind of how WhatsApp won was, okay, you have incredibly reliable messaging. You can send a message, it's going to get to someone in all these spotty networks. That kind of is a core thing, but SMS kind of had that, BBM kind of had that. And so there's like, all this thing, but WhatsApp started adding some incremental features to it. You could start to send photos. You could start to do a call. You could start to do a video call, and you could then eventually post to stories, like the Instagram stories product that is in WhatsApp called Status. And essentially what you see if you look at Indonesia and the history of messaging in Indonesia is that it was a tight competition, but as WhatsApp started to layer in some of those calling features, it really started to get differentiated, and you started to see the network effects take off. And so like, it was a slow kind of very linear growth. And then calling comes out, and all of a sudden you start to see an angle change. And so the functionality of what the kind of core customer base had, that they could start to do, it made it so that they started bringing in the rest of the network. And WhatsApp didn't have to spend on marketing. That wasn't like the way they were trying to grow. It was just core functionality, but built on the network effects of the customer base they had. And, it was like quite a great lesson. Now WhatsApp, and when I was at WhatsApp, which was more than 4 years ago, a lot of the kind of increasing competition was around groups and group messaging.
Mm.
And Telegram in particular was really heavily leaning into groups, and it was starting to be kind of a competitive threat with WhatsApp. And so WhatsApp was focused on groups, building a lot of group features, trying to make it so that you could do groups, thinking about the size of groups, the richness of groups, the controls in groups. And so it's always a competition. You're at different stages of that competition. It's, you're always kind of thinking about how do you leverage the network you have, add more functionality, and kind of go against it. The thing I would say though overall is WhatsApp didn't really talk about competition. It was like much more the data team seeing the like growth of these other products and the network effects in some different markets and being like, hey, we need to focus on this because again, WhatsApp as a product team was really focused on what's the experience? How do we make this the best experience possible, using it heavily all the time and that sort of thing. And so sometimes with that focus on product, you can like not have blind spots to that. And I think that bringing in data into that kind of culture made it so that they were much more aware of the blind spots and able to kind of respond to those blind spots with some different product functionality that mattered. And that's really kind of like the story of WhatsApp now is that product's still growing. It's over 3 billion users, building a really healthy kind of business ecosystem around it. And it kind of just has continued to evolve. The product that is today wasn't the product 10 years ago.
Very cool. I've heard you mention in the past that, a lot of people think of growth as just acquisition, but it's more than acquisition.
Yeah.
Why do people get that wrong? And like, what's more there to growth besides acquisition?
Yeah. So truly in every single team or product I've ever been asked to grow, the first thing someone asks me to do is, hey, run a marketing campaign. It's now a meme for me that like, okay, I'm going to show up. I'm going to be asked to run a marketing campaign. And I do the math and I say, okay, here's what your conversion rate looks like. Here's what your retention rate looks like. Here's kind of what we're going to back out into of what the cost per acquisition and the LTV you're going to get. It doesn't make sense to run this marketing campaign. And they're like, great work. We would like you to run the marketing campaign. So, okay, cool. So I run the marketing campaign every single time. I mean, truly every single time. I run the marketing campaign and it doesn't pay off. It's like, hey, it doesn't make sense to go 10x this budget because, we converted, at $100 customer acquisition cost and the LTV is like $5. Like, how are we going to do that? Particularly for WhatsApp. Like WhatsApp wanted to grow in some markets, but like there's no payback on WhatsApp. And so like, how does it make sense? Maybe a big company can fund that, but a smaller company especially can't fund that. And so, the way I have come to think about it is what you care about is the outcome of active users or paying users or like the final end of the funnel for a marketing campaign. What a marketing campaign does is often gets people in the door, but it's not the thing that takes people all the way to that kind of paying moment or retentive moment, as I describe it. And so you can do the math on what that journey is going to look like. If you acquire 100 people at your current funnel, what's it going to look like in terms of the number of people that are going to, get through the sign up flow, going to use the first feature, and then going to end up in a paying experience. And when you do that math, marketing actually looks like a bad equation. And so when I think about growth, you have to think about that full journey of you've got to get in front of the right people. You got to, bid effectively. You've got to do all that stuff. The copy has to be great, but the best marketing campaign with no retention or conversion doesn't work. It's just not the thing that's actually going to scale your business. And so you can go waste a bunch of money to go learn that lesson, or you can really start to think about it as each step of that funnel, start to try to improve that step of the funnel, and then see if you can ultimately use marketing as a rocket fuel to the business. Because when you can get that right, when you can figure out the equation of how you get to a retentive user and the economics start to work out for a certain customer acquisition cost, you can basically spend infinitely. You can spend as much as possible, as humanly possible, to get those paying users. And at some point, maybe your CAC rises to the place where you can't. But if that works, I've seen businesses go to mega scale because of it. But most businesses don't end up there. They kind of end up in it's close, but it's not there. And close and it's not there is just going to do great over time. And so, when I think about growth, I think about the full user experience of the journey and then the product, marketing and partnerships pieces along each step of that to try to make sure it's great.
So, I think growth has sort of it's certainly a sexy role. I'm helping do growth. I'm helping a startup grow. helping a product grow, and because of like how cool and lucrative that role is, it ends up kind of being limited to like, just growth hacking.
Mm.
But what you're saying is there's a lot more to it than just acquisition and conversion. There's also retention.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is the first time I've heard of like a growth person really go deep on like, hey, retention matters. And so like how should a PM, a startup founder, like a team think about retention when it comes to like as a part of the growth funnel?
Yeah. So basically, how I view this is if you don't have flat cohort retention, meaning some percent of the people that sign up for your product stick around long term, the entire company needs to focus on that. And you don't need to focus on growth. There's actually a right and a wrong time to focus on growth. And in many cases, I look at it, I've talked to a bunch of different companies where they just don't have stable retention. People eventually churn out. And so my advice to those folks is don't even spend time on growth. It doesn't matter. When you have that, then you need to start figuring out how you maximize it. And so the way you define retention is you look at the percent of people that start in a given period of time, like a month, and how many are still using it X months out. And what you're looking for is that number asymptoting above 0. So you want to see a curve that kind of, some people are always going to drop off, but you want some people that are sticking around long term. And so, in every team I've worked on, I monitor cohort retention like a hawk. It is the thing I pull up on the first of every month where I see what did the previous cohorts do? Is it stable? Is it changing? Is it improving? And then I'm using that to inform a bunch of what we do on acquisition or working on kind of improvements to retention or different pieces of this, because it is one of the biggest levers that is going to drive the rest of the growth of the business. And so how should you think about it? As critical, as like, the first thing you should think about before you go do any kind of growth effort. You have to have stable retention, and you have to understand how that retention is coming. Is it coming from a specific segment? Is it coming from users that took a certain behavior early on and things like this? And once you kind of understand that, you can then really go figure out your growth plan for that. I joined Mercury about 4 years ago, and literally the first analysis I did was, what's the retention of this product? Like, what does the curve look like? What does it look like over time? And when you have that, you can then really place your bets super well. Without that, I find a lot of people are just shooting in the dark.
So I kind of want to spend like part of the conversation on like, career and also then AI. So I've heard you mention, follow your passion is terrible career advice. You've had a pretty interesting journey starting customer support, ended up VP of product at one of the hottest fintech startups. Walk us through that journey, and why do you think follow your passion is not good career advice?
Well, I mean, my career started probably before I started working at Facebook. And, growing up, I was a tennis player, and I grew up in a small town in Arkansas. It was a big football town. And I decided that I didn't want to play football. And so I really wanted to get out of that town. And the thing I latched onto was tennis, which is kind of a weird thing to latch onto, but whatever. And I got pretty good at tennis. I started play. I ended up playing in college. I was like really pursuing it, spent all my summers doing it. It was mostly all of my life was playing tennis. And I started to realize that there was like an end to that path, that I couldn't ever go play professional. I tried to play in a professional tournament. I got smoked. I was just like not good enough to actually go to the next level of tennis. And so I started to panic. I started to realize like, oh no, the thing I was really passionate about isn't going to be like the thing that I make money from or really kind of grow in over the next 20, 30 years. And, I kind of had like an existential crisis in my life. And, I was actually graduating college. I didn't have a job. I had applied to about 40 jobs because I had focused on tennis so much. I was like, couldn't get a job. No one really wanted to hire me. I didn't really have that much work experience. But I found a contract job in Austin, Texas, working on the customer support team. I started the Monday after I graduated.
That's at Facebook.
That was at Facebook. And it was the Monday after the IPO. And so I didn't really know much about Facebook. I was a Facebook user, but kind of saw the job opportunity. And I was like, I'm going to do everything I can to get this job. I used a bunch of tennis examples in the interview. Like my interviewers still laugh about it. But I did everything I could to get the contract job, which was like 6 months. You're going to just be a chat rep for our like ad support business. And so I stumbled into that job, and I didn't have much else going on. So I just decided to crush it. I'm going to be the best customer support rep I can, because all these businesses were talking to me. My parents had been entrepreneurs their entire lives, and like they wanted help with this giant company, this advertising product that was confusing. And like I was just talking to them all day, and I was like, man, I want this experience to be great. No one wants to reach out to support for any product, but if they're going to, I want them to have a great experience. And so I focused all the energy I had on tennis just to like, how do I make this customer support rep inquiry great? And that was like, that became the thing that drove me. I ended up getting a full-time job there. And as I started to do that, the thing that I saw was that there's patterns in what people are writing in about. And it's actually very predictable. And I found this kind of across the board, that whenever you're looking at something like support tickets, you can start to analyze what's happening in the support tickets. And so like I started to analyze them, and I started to find patterns that we could do things differently. When someone asks about a payment issue, the first thing we should ask is, hey, what transaction is this for? And if we could actually do that in the contact form, it made the entire experience much happier, much simpler, much faster. And so we started to tweak some things in the support experience to do that. And so I started to run some experiments. I was at Facebook, like I was seeing all this stuff happening, and I was like, okay, like how can I steal what they're doing with support and go try to like make support better? That led me to a team at Facebook that was called Growth Marketing under Alex Schultz. And that was essentially my master's education in how products grow. And so I spent about 10 years at Facebook on different products at Facebook, Facebook ads, workplace, and WhatsApp, basically trying to learn, how is this company getting to scale? Like what is happening? What's the dynamics? Like how do they approach product? How do they approach the changes they choose to make in a given time? And I didn't really think that like growth was my passion, but it kind of turns out it's the intersection of being able to like diagnose problems in a specific area and then being able to make changes. And I love just seeing what happens when I make a change. I love it in my life. I love it at work. And so I started to do that, and I started to do that a bunch on different things. And I started to learn these kind of patterns of things that lead to growth. And that's, after about 10 years of that, Facebook was a huge company. And I was like, okay, does this really work? And so I, set off and went and joined a startup, and that was Mercury right after their Series B. And it turns out it does work. There's these common things that you can take in growth about how you understand, identify, and execute. And if you just run that playbook and you run it really well, you can actually meaningfully inflect the trajectory of products. And so that's like my story in a nutshell, was like the thing I was passionate about didn't work out. On to the next. How do I find a passion in this? And how do I then go develop it into something that is, both fulfilling for me and like what I do every day, but also something that moves companies forward and helps build great products. And that, I think, is probably like the arc of my career, is just, chasing curiosity more than passion.
I love that. So you're kind of like chasing curiosity, kind of like finding a challenge.
Yeah.
Sounds like you want to do football or do tennis and go figure out tennis.
Yeah.
I ended up at a customer support job. I'm going to go figure out how to do this really, really well. And so do you think a lot of that applies to kind of growing products and growing teams, where it's kind of like identifying problems and then solving them and discovering?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's spot on. Like, just to give you like an example, like, when you're playing tennis, right, you may have a goal of winning a tournament, but you got to show up to practice, and you got to like do the practice as best as you can. And like, if I'm trying to like 2x Mercury, I still got to show up today and decide what's the best thing I can do today. And so I draw these parallels between that experience and like, if you're getting 1% better every day with everything that you do, that is going to show up in that outcome. And if not, you need to kind of calibrate and check that. But it's the same thing. I'm doing the same thing I've been doing for 20 years, which is just like, what can I do today? And like, where do I want to go? And just kind of constantly calibrating that.
Very cool. You've also had some like, times where what you originally wanted to do didn't really pan out. Tennis, I heard you had a injury. You broke your foot. I mean, that sounds rough. How do you have like a principle or framework to just kind of keep going that you think applies to startups?
The truth is, you win by staying in the game. And like, you really kind of have to have a long arc on what you believe is true. Like, the thing I think I probably draw as a parallel is, I see a lot of people jump jobs every 12, 18 months, maybe every 2 years. Like, that is a way, but you have to actually live with your decisions long enough to know how it's going to go. And like, How I think about it and how I kind of thought about it with tennis or the different things I've encountered is there like a long-term path that I really care about? And am I willing to see that long-term path play out? And I find that I just have the endurance to go through really hard times because that benefit you get on the outside of that is so incredible. You know, when I got to Mercury, there was no growth team, there was no data team. And I was like, what do I do? And for the first, couple months, I was like, do I even have a job here? Like, is there even anything for me to do? But I just tried to think about, okay, how would I approach this if I was, the founder of WhatsApp? How would I approach this if I was Mark Zuckerberg? And how would I approach it from all the mentors I learned from? And I broke it down into little pieces of do an analysis, go try to talk to an engineer to get one change done so we can see if that change leads to anything. And I just tried to take these little small pieces. 4 years back, some of that stuff was the most formative work that I've ever done. And it's just because it was like, hey, let's just go after these little things. And if we do those little things enough, it's going to add up. And if not, someone's going to come yank me out of the job and fire me. And like, I'll just go do this somewhere else. And so it's like a willingness to go kind of fail, but also not fail for lack of trying.
So it's less of like chasing dopamine from quick wins, and it's more like just building the endurance and the system to make changes that compound over time and fail fast, move on from things that don't work and double down on things that work.
Exactly. I call this explore then exploit. You've got to constantly be placing bets. And then when you find a bet that works, you just go super hard at it. And actually, I find that everyone kind of on growth talks about quick wins, but actually the best thing is when you have a great idea and it doesn't work. I love that experience because I'm like, what did I get wrong? Why didn't it work? What's the dynamics of what I misunderstood? And then I make the adjustment and I'm willing to go do it again. And, if you do that enough over time, you're going to find something that works. And that's kind of been a pretty consistent theme through my life.
Super cool. Now as you're recruiting people, you're recruiting growth people, product people, what are some things you look for? Is there a specific background you recruit for? Is there a certain personality, a certain mindset you recruit for? I've heard you mention in the past that you look for the ability to kind of unblock people to not be blocked by anybody. Is that a thing that's kind of a core principle when it comes to recruiting?
Yeah. I mean, I would ladder that up to, I look for agency. Is this someone who can just get things done no matter where they are, no matter the circumstance, no matter the reasons it's hard to get something done? And I'm constantly looking for that. And I often find that the people who are best at that have gone through some very jungle gym type journey. The person that has had, the best education, the best first job, the, very blue ribbon type experience hasn't had to really figure out what happens when no one listens to them. And, I've been in that situation a ton, and I've kind of seen that there's so much power in being able to be unblocked, to never have to wait for someone to tell you what to do, to always be finding how can you get something done that wouldn't get done? How can you find a way to build a relationship with an engineer to get them to ship something they wouldn't have otherwise shipped? How can you go, learn how to pull data and different stuff like that? That's kind of a common pattern of across PMs, data scientists, executives that I've seen is something that really matters to success in a job. And so that's the thing I look for is do they have agency and do they have a willingness to just go run through walls? Because the type of people that are constantly looking for positive feedback or guidance tend to just end up in a lower maxima. The types of people that have their own belief and are willing to go achieve that belief or go run through a wall and find out they ran through the wrong wall. That's the kind of person I want. And sometimes that's a bit spikier. Sometimes that means they're a bit less agreeable, but those are the people that really succeed. And I've seen succeed over time. And so, yeah, that's my take.
I love that. You're gonna clip that and whatever was this interview and just can have that as a recruiting principle.
Sure.
Because it's if you went to Stanford and you just had the best job out of college, you just had everything just kind of perfectly lined up, then you're just not, you don't have the ability. Of course you're smart, you have the ability to kind of figure stuff out. And in startup you just kind of need that. What do you do when the first thing you try doesn't work?
Yeah, totally.
A lot of it's kind of in a boxing terminology, it's kind of what do you do when you get punched in the face?
For sure.
All the plan kind of just goes out of the door and you just got to figure stuff out on the spot.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that pedigree doesn't matter and that that going to a great school is like a negative signal, but the people that have that agency plus some experience, like, really playing to win or on the big stage, like that is actually also a great combination too. But the thing is the agency.
Yeah.
It's not like the background that led them to there. Like, it's really how do they engage with the circumstances they're put in front of them.
Yeah. I feel like one thing the people with the pedigree do have though is they have this kind of like confidence
Mm.
that they don't doubt themselves. And I've kind of found that a lot of other people have to kind of develop that
Yeah.
through experiences.
Yeah. That's a lot of the people that ask me to go run marketing campaigns. Yeah. Yeah.
Just like,
Yeah.
all right, Ryan, we need you to come in.
I've got it. We're going to grow this product. It's going to be the best marketing campaign you've ever seen. Yeah. Okay, cool.
I love that. How does Ryan use AI day to day?
Oh man. I'm like a what I would describe as a power user of AI. The biggest thing is, my background in work experience as an analyst, and like I'm someone that writes SQL, does a lot of data. I'm not that technical, but it has basically 10x'd my ability to do that. I now have like a couple of small tools at Mercury. I've poked around in Julius as well, and I think this pattern of being able to do advanced analytics with just the right context is so powerful for so many people. And I think I view it as like a huge unlock. And so by far the biggest thing I'm doing in AI is some specific tasks that would have taken me going and writing SQL, figuring out some logic or something like that to go analyze something. Now I can just write a simple query, put it in, ask it to do this complex growth analysis on it and get the result. And it has truly compressed the amount of time it takes for me to get valuable insights as a leader to like, less than hours. Where it would have taken like a day or two, where I really had to have like a focus block of time. And so by far that, other than that, I'm talking to it all the time. It's basically like, an executive coach, feedback on how I'm showing up in different places. Like I just sent this message to my team, anything I could do to be better. And so I'm constantly just asking for kind of takes based on people that I'm inspired by. Like what would Frank Slootman say about this strategy or different things like this? Because I find it's very good at taking written content and being able to like transpose how someone thinks about something. And the final thing is, I use it in my life a ton. I have a big garden. I'm a big cook. I have a 4-month-old. Like that baby is being raised by ChatGPT. And it's like a very critical thing. But, basically I just view it as the same continuum of what it felt like when I was growing up to get internet. Like I was in a small town in Arkansas. There wasn't much in the world. Could go to a library, but then we got a computer at our home with AOL. And the amount of information I could suddenly access and start to poke around opened my mind up to like a world of possibility. And every day I open up ChatGPT or Claude and I find the same thing. It's like an infinite amount of what I can go do with my life, with the information I get. And so I'm using it a ton for that.
Super cool. So you have a background as an analyst. You look at data as a part of your job every day. You use AI to help you analyze that data. How do you think AI will empower many different roles, the Ryans of 10 years ago to like new ones starting today, building a startup or product to get insights?
Okay, so there's a slight tangent, but I was talking to one of the data scientists that works on our team, and they were very fearful about what AI is. They basically like, my job's going to go away now because it can write SQL so well. And what I told them was your job didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. Like when I was starting at Facebook, the kind of big data revolution was really just at the beginning, where people had started to have the role of data scientist as someone that pulls data. Maybe there was always analyst looking at different things, but kind of the role of writing SQL from big data clusters to pull specific information is a pretty new job, 10 to 15 years. And I think it's like going to evolve from there. And it's just like it evolved from the analyst that looks at a spreadsheet or printed out version of a spreadsheet into a data scientist that manipulates SQL. Like I think that kind of continuum of evolution is going to continue. And what I see as like kind of the big thing is that the ability for a business unit or anyone at a company to get the information they need is going to collapse. It's going to be much easier to get the information and to make decisions based on that information. And, having been at a company and really learned at Facebook what the power of data is, it is pretty incredible what is going to become available to all sorts of different people and all sorts of different jobs, because there you had PhDs doing this, funnel analysis to run the experiment that figures out you change the color of the button, it really works. Now that is going to be possible for anyone to do without a PhD, without a very experienced skill set. And I think that the democratization of data is probably one of the most powerful things for PMs and different people at companies today that didn't exist 10 years ago. Like if I could have done some of the data work that I can do now in those jobs, I probably would have been like 10 times more successful, like, really would have moved the business forward in a lot of ways, because it was just so hard to learn how to write SQL. And so like, I think that making that possible is just really, really going to accelerate business. But at the same time, right, that only works if you have the data structured well, well documented, well laid out, and if you are asking the right questions. And so those things aren't going to change. You still need incredibly structured data. You still need the right questions. But if you have that combo of things, I think the powers of knowledge is just going to expand among the workplace quite impressively.
Love that. You have to have the curiosity about data.
Yeah.
AI won't replace curiosity. It will help you do more.
Absolutely. I strongly agree with that.
So you're saying data is getting democratized. It's going to empower PMs, growth people, executives to go seek their own insights. If you were to give somebody a short playbook, hey, data is democratized. Here's how you can kind of go do your job better with data, especially if they're like a product person, what would you say?
The short is that I think that there's really probably like 5 analyses, maybe 10, that really make up the majority of insights delivered on any product team that exist. It's some version of pull a list of customers that meet this criteria, look at a funnel, look at retention, look at correlation of behavior. And I could probably go on from there, but let's just take those 4, right? I think that really you have to hone in on what are you trying to bring in data to make a decision for, and what is the best way to do this. And actually brainstorming with AI is an incredible way to do this. Like, hey, I have this problem. I'm trying to 2x our product next year. Here's like the trends of the company, screenshot of the dashboard. What should I go look at? And like that, even that's like an okay way to do it. But let me just take the classic example of a funnel. Being able to ask AI, hey, where's the drop off in this funnel? And send a full kind of like data set of all the users going through the funnel and have it do that analysis. That's the kind of thing that I think is has been hard to do historically, where, a PM wants to know where should they invest. They have to wait on a data scientist to answer that question. Now that's collapsed. And the best people I'm seeing that either in the data science role, the PM role, or even in design are starting to be that hybrid of people that are bringing in different skill sets. A PM that can pull data, that can say, hey, I want this data. I have this data. I would like to see this. Like, what's the SQL to get to that? Or, I pulled a spreadsheet from our database. Like, how can you do this analysis for me? That's where I'm really seeing superpowers emerge around different skill sets and different people using these tools. And so I think it starts, again, with that understand, identify, execute. Like, where are you trying to go? Where are you now? How do you break that down? How do you find opportunities in that? And then how do you go crush it on the execution so that you can feed back into that cycle and you can get to a place where you know what the levers are? That's maybe my take on that.
Love that. So now that AI is here, how are you changing about how you're building a data team?
Yeah. Okay. So when I got to Mercury, there was no data team. It's about a 200-person company. And I had been at Facebook for the last 10 years, which was, data was a core part of everything. And, there's a lot of reasons for that, but essentially I found that my highest leverage at Mercury was to go build the data team. So I went and hired the first few data scientists, hired the first few data engineers. We've now built that team to about 25 people. It's providing a ton of value across the business and really critical. But AI didn't really exist when I started doing that. And, if AI had been a part of it, I think I probably would have taken some changes on that. Particularly, I think it is right now very hard for me as a data leader to hire junior data scientists. And the core of the reason is that most of the work of a junior data scientist is taking a small business question, translating that into SQL, and then returning a result back to the stakeholders. And that workflow is very automatable. And, we actually have a junior data scientist. She graduated college. She was an intern at Mercury, and I mentored her and I brought her along with this. And the majority of the way she learned to write SQL was using ChatGPT. And that's like a totally different experience than what I had, which is that I had to go read through documentation or books, like little physical books, to go see what are all the things I can do. And so it was, I think, very helpful for her to be in an environment where she could be coached with AI towards a problem, but a majority of the work that she kind of did initially, particularly as the most junior data scientist, was go pull this list. That's now automatable. And so we're not going to hire junior data scientists anytime soon. I think that it may change. That may become something we bring back in because we want to think about career development and bringing in new energy into the company. But right now, I'm really looking to people to have the experience of navigating different databases, different stakeholder questions, and how they can leverage those skills to actually go make a difference. And I'm looking less to bring someone along with how to show up and how to pull the right data or answer the right question, because I just think so much of that is going away with the kind of models and the trajectory of the models. Maybe the one other thing I would say is the role of data engineering and analytics engineering is so critical. We did this thing a couple of years ago where we forced our teams to document every table and column. And in an AI world, that has given us superpowers because we don't have to go explain what's the business logic behind why is this column this way. It's in the documentation. We pass that into the context and it goes incredibly well. And so if I could go back to building that data team, probably would have hired data engineering sooner, probably would have hired a less junior data scientist, and would have had a lot better data structured for kind of where the world's going.
Do the stakeholders that would rely on the junior data scientists, are they still able to get the insights, even though you're not hiring junior data scientists anymore?
Yeah, we have tried to, when I say democratize data, we have tried to create tools for self-service that can answer 80% of the basic questions we get. We had this channel for about 3 years that was called Querious, where people could go post their data question and get a data answer. And there's a human answering that question 100% of the time for 3 years. Now, I ask everyone to go try to use one of our AI tools to go understand if they can get an answer to this question first. And if they can't, they should come post back to it. The volume of that channel has dropped to 10% of what it was, because it turns out that most of those questions were pretty basic questions about pulling a list of users, pulling a funnel, pulling a correlation, or something pretty simple. And so, yeah, we've just seen a total change in behavior. But it also had to come with the expectation set across the company of, hey, we now have these tools. You actually have to go use them. You can't just outsource your thinking to someone else.
Super cool. How does a startup hire a Ryan? When is the right point to bring on a Ryan? And how do you go about convincing a Ryan to take a bet on a startup?
I don't know. I take beef with hiring a Ryan, but so I think when you want, the way I would kind of describe my profile is I'm kind of an analytic product builder that will just run through walls.
Yeah.
And, particularly growth walls. And that's the thing that I find is the intersection of my passion. And so the thing that needs to happen for that to be true, a product has to have product market fit.
Yeah.
When I was deciding to leave Meta, I decided I want to go to a company that has just the inklings of product market fit. It's just starting to show up. It's very early on, but it's stable. It's working, because in that place, that's where I can have leverage. That's when I can start to actually apply the things that I've learned on understanding, identifying, and executing to accelerate the growth of that company. And so first, it's prepare the field, get to product market fit, have a thing that's stable, and know when you want to put a ton of gas on that accelerator, because I think that's the right time. I've talked to I've come up with a lot of other people, and a lot of people leave for a startup that is much earlier stage, that maybe doesn't have product market fit, and they kind of just spin their wheels for a long time. I think it has to be the right, it's not product market fit, but it has to be the right job fit for what the skill set is. And so I think prepare the company for the right stage of a person. And the last thing is, I would say, is you got to have a broad view. What I found in several years of doing growth work is that my job's never the same. Sometimes it is more marketing, sometimes it's more product, sometimes it's more analytics. And I am someone that can flex between those. That's totally fine with me to play whatever role I need to play to grow the product. But if you come in with a specific vision of what that person is going to do, and you give them constraints when they have this kind of very diverse skill set, you're going to end up just using them for the wrong thing. And a relationship I set with Ahmad early was hey, let me go cook. Let me go try to figure out what I can do, and I'll come tell you. And if it's not working, I'll come tell you it's not working, and I'll be the first to say it. But I need space. I need you to let me go explore, go try some things, and then really kind of figure out what we're going to go do with this growth team. And he said, okay. And I think that was one of the kindest things someone has ever done, I don't think it would have happened at like Meta. You kind of were in a very tight rails, but you know, for an early stage company to give a senior leader the ability to go figure it out, that was like quite fun. And I think that's like the thing that really sold me on Mercury was like products there, space is great, people are great.
Super cool. Well, you've done over 10 years of growth at a consumer company, Facebook and WhatsApp, and then now a company that sells banking to startups. And how is growth the same? And how is it different between the two?
Yeah. A lot of people ask me this and they think that B2C growth and B2B growth are very different things. So like, oh, like, can you even go do, the other version of it? I've found that there's so many commonalities that actually it's like, where are they actually different is my question. And the kind of core of it is that you have to have a product that when someone lands on whatever surface you're getting them, they convert, they sign up, they activate, they engage. Now, sometimes the people that you're actually selling to is a big company or a big team or something like that, but there's still one person going along that journey and making some of those key steps along that. Sometimes you have a buyer persona and you have like the user persona and different things like this, but at the end of the day, you're trying to convince people to sign up for your product, to set it up, and to use it. And so like I found that is true across every product I've worked on. And maybe the slight flavor is different, but you can go look at a funnel or a retention curve of any product and it still matters. And it still matters for how you grow that product. And so, my short answer is the principles are the exact same. I mean, the core of it is like, I have a belief that, when someone signs up for a product and they start to use it, there is a moment where they say, hell yes. They really decide to go in. And those are the types of customers you want. And you need to maximize the number of people that see that and do that. And that is true for a B2C product. It's actually it has to be much quicker with a B2C product, but it's also true for a B2B product. When someone's choosing, they're an entrepreneur and they're choosing to get a bank account for the first time, what do they care about? Well, the option for the last kind of 50 years has been, I'm going to go drive to a bank branch. I'm going to go stand in line, then I'm going to hand over my documents. And then, hopefully by the end of this, I leave with a bank account. Maybe it's like a day or two later. Right? So the thing that matters is the time that someone puts into it. And so even though we're a B2B product trying to sell to entrepreneurs, it's still a person that alternatively would go drive to a bank branch. And so what Mercury did was put that application online, get the approval process online. And that time it takes for a user to see this product and decide to go use it, that's the thing that matters for Mercury. And I think that's true for any B2B product. There's still a moment where someone is making a choice to express interest in your product and deciding to get it. And if you can maximize that moment about what makes your product magical, you win in B2C, B2B, enterprise B2B, whatever it may be. Like there still has to be that experience of someone feeling something about the value they see in that product. And the faster you get to that, the tighter it is, the more you grow.
Fantastic. Walk me through, you show up to Mercury 2020, is that 2021?
2021, summer 2021.
What was the first 6 months like?
Yeah, it's a wild thing joining a startup after working at a large company. And so like I didn't have any idea of what to expect. So I joined as the head of growth in July of 2021. Mercury didn't really know what that meant. So it was kind of like, hey, come figure it out. And I had a great relationship with the CEO, Ahmad. And I basically said, okay, let me go explore. And so the first, really 2 to 3 months were a ton of data analysis. I went and looked at every funnel. I went and looked at the retention curves. I looked at what is our average value per customer. Where do we actually make money? So I broke down a ton of things and I came up with a basically short version of a roadmap of let me go try to change some things. This goes back to the growth system idea, but a growth system, you can understand it, but to really understand it, you have to go change it. And you have to go see what happens when you pull different levers or you try different things, because to know how to grow a product, you actually have to see it through the understanding, but also the experimentation. And then through that, you really start to learn what matters for growing a product. And so the first 6 months were a ton of that, bunch of data analysis, small scrappy team with a couple engineers to just go try some things. And a lot of the things we tried didn't work, but a couple did. And so that became then the roadmap that we went on to from there was, hey, let's go really try to make these parts of the experience great. And it was a lot of the onboarding journey. What happens when someone shows up? What happens when they apply? What happens in the moment after they apply? When they first sign up, open up the account for Mercury, what is the thing they see on that page? And, like many businesses, Mercury hadn't thought about that experience because they had been building the product for customers that were actually using it. And so you show up to the Mercury experience and there's zeros everywhere because you have no money in your account and things like that. And it doesn't really tell you how to get the zeros to not be zeros. So the first thing we did was we built an experience around that. Turns out that's a huge lever because immediately people started to deposit more. And then we could just go keep working on that. And so that became 6 to 12 months of work where we just really refined that experience. And, was a really big growth lever for us.
So this is the first 6 months.
Yeah.
And then walk me through the journey of like kind of growing Mercury beyond that.
Yeah. So when you think about growth, the thing that I think about is what is the journey that the users you're trying to reach are on? What are they experiencing? Like, who are they? How do they go through the world? How do they end up deciding to use your product or another person's product? And one of the things that we found, and I thought about a ton, was when you sign up for a bank account, you don't really know what you're getting. Even when you go drive to a bank branch, maybe you're getting that bank branch experience, you're getting the person across from the desk from you. But in an increasingly digital world, you have no idea what you're signing up for. And Mercury had this internal engineering tool that lets you show a mock environment of Mercury, the product. And so you could play around with different experiences in Mercury and see what the UX was actually like. And so I was thinking about this idea, how do we get in front of people for Mercury? And how do we tell them our story? Because Mercury is really a product-led banking experience where the product is the difference. And so one of the things that we did was we took that mock environment and we made it a public demo where people could click on a link, they could see the full Mercury product. And it was actually the first time, I believe, in maybe all of human history where you could see a banking product before you signed up for it. And it was kind of a crazy idea because you're kind of giving away the secret sauce of the experience. It's pretty controversial internally to go launch it, but we launched it and my little growth touch was putting an open account button on the top. So you go to this demo.mercury.com experience, you see the product, you get a little open account button. We just put it out. We put a couple links on the website, a couple things like that. A huge hit. It was enormous. People loved it. And they loved it because they could actually see the product for the first time. And we weren't treating them like it was a value exchange. We just let them see the product. We didn't ask for emails. We didn't make them talk to someone to go see the product. It was like just the purest product-led growth experience that we could imagine. And it turns out it's a huge growth driver. It's also a huge recruiting lever. But there was one time where I won't disclose who, but a business showed up on our demo product, decided to sign up, and then deposited $50 million.
Wow.
That is
all self-serve,
all self-service.
Incredible,
right? That is product-led growth right there. When you can really tell the story of your product, let someone experience it, let them sign up and use the product without you needing to be involved at all. That is the most pure version of what I believe growth should be. And that has been kind of become some of the things that we've done. And so that was like a bet that we took. And that was like a bet based on a moment in the funnel, how we thought about that. We placed a ton of other bets like that too. And we thought about other parts of the journey people go on. When someone signs up, people talk about Mercury because they love the experience of Mercury. And so they go tell people about it. So can we build a referral mechanism to do that? That's now become 10% of our growth. When someone signs up for Mercury, they're an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs often create more than one business. So we allowed them to easily create their second business. Each of these ideas are kind of things about the journey and the person, but we took those pieces, we tried to make them the best experience we could in the Mercury way that we can, and they became really big growth levers. And so that's maybe like some of how we thought about it.
Incredible. Building products, building growth engines, building a great experience. Do you ever look for other parts of the world to kind of like help drive your thinking?
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is yes, but I find that most people look at competitors and they're thinking about, what's the competitor doing that I should? I would say that I and Mercury as a whole really looks for inspiration all across the world from different experiences, not even just products that exist, but also art, music, like poetry even. Mercury is quite a funny culture in that way. And we really think about, what is the experience we want someone to feel when they're using this product? And what is the kind of corollary places where you feel that elsewhere? So classic example of this is, one of the things that we do is when someone has a tea purchase on their Mercury card, we reimburse it. And this comes from a culture of Mercury where it was a lot of the founders sitting around having tea. Tea is a really integral part of building Mercury and how Mercury was built. But it also became an ethos of what's it like when you sit down to have tea. It's pretty relaxed. It's pretty enjoyable. You're having something that's quite nice to drink. And so we've tried to think about how we create that feeling of sitting down for a cup of tea with all that you're doing on Mercury. We try to make it super simple. We try to make it delightful when you use it. And then we try to bring in the kind of parts where we're actually willing to reimburse your tea when you make a purchase on your Mercury account with it. And I think that that's like the type of inspiration that we bring into what we build is, where are the really magical experiences across the world, not just in the other products. And that's somehow we try to build.
Super cool. Now, speaking of Mercury and magical experiences, there was a time in March 2023 where it felt like the world was going to fall apart, at least in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. It was the SVB crisis. If you could walk me through, what was that like working on a banking product with startups as a customer? What was that like for Mercury and for you and for your team?
Yeah. It was truly probably one of the craziest weeks of my life is probably the way of describing it. Prior to March of 2023, the default choice for banking in most startups was Silicon Valley Bank. They had just built out an incredible product, built out an incredible network, and it was no one gets fired for choosing SVB at the time. When the collapsing crisis happened, immediately that day, and really maybe even about 6 hours before it kind of became public, we started to see massive influx of people banging down our door to get to Mercury. And the dynamics that we had been building on for the past 4 or 5 years really came in to be a differentiator in that moment, because it's actually super tough to get a bank account very quickly. If you're trying to go open a Chase account or a Charles Schwab account or any other bank that exists, you have to go wait in line in person, and then you have to wait for them to process it. And so people started showing up at Mercury immediately on that day, and we went all hands on deck of trying to get them into the Mercury account. We have to go through all sorts of rigorous process around verifying who they are, what their business is, what it does. But at the same time, these are people with an urgent need to have a bank account that they can send money to get it out of SVB. And we, the entire company basically pivoted in that moment to go meet that need and to go service whatever we need to do. All sorts of people leaning in to help our onboarding, to help with support questions, to build useful features, and to really make sure that we're meeting the need of the customers that we had. And, I don't know how much we've talked about this that much publicly, but overnight, the number of people showing up on Mercury on a given basis daily doubled. And it was an overnight doubling, and that continued for about, 7 days, particularly for the, people, the exiles of SVB. But then it actually just was a step change in our business, and it kind of continued. Because the thing that changed in SVB, in the moment around SVB, was there was a sudden willingness to look for options that both have the reliance of banking model. Mercury is built on partner banks that have the kind of security and stability that are needed for businesses of all kinds, but it has the convenience of the online application, the really useful UI. And, it's been something that much more people were willing to talk about after that SVB moment, much more willing to consider. And those customers that came in that kind of moment of SVB have stuck around. I looked at this yesterday, and 95% of them still use Mercury. We've had incredible kind of retention from that cohort because we stepped up to meet that moment, but that's kind of what we're trying to do all the time. And so it was really just a moment of intensity, but then kind of a continued playing out of the ethos of what we're trying to build, which is a product-led banking experience that customers love. And we've done that kind of over and over since then.
Fantastic. 4 years of Mercury. You walked us through, first 6 months, then growing the team into the role, and then the SVB crisis, of course. 95% retention in that cohort. Incredible. 4 years in, how's Mercury like now?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the short is we're a dramatically different company. When it works, you really scale up faster than you think. And that's kind of the wild thing. But, just to give you an example of this, when I joined, Mercury was about 20,000 customers. It's now somewhere over 200,000, and it's actually quite a bit higher than that. So the thing we've done has really kind of scaled and worked And the things that I saw were working at that time are still working today, but we're doing it at a much bigger scale, much more complexity. And so, at the time, the product was pretty simple. It was largely a bank account, maybe a couple small features. Now we're doing things like credit cards, bill payment, invoicing, a bunch of accounting features that are really valuable, and starting to think about personal banking as well. And we've taken kind of the same approaches of let's really try to build a great product that people love and do that in all the different spaces of the business and do it in a way that kind of ladders up to something that feels really magical and the sum is greater than the parts. And so, my experience of the journey is, super fast growth. The company has scaled faster than I could possibly imagine, but the core of how we build every day stays the same. And I think that is what I find is that you shouldn't stray too far from the core thing that gets you to where you got to. You can always be learning and bringing in new things. But, I saw this at WhatsApp where the things that were working at WhatsApp were the same things that worked for 10 years. The things that worked at Facebook to scale Facebook up were the same things that worked for 10 years. It's a valuable product at its core. And all the growth tactics, all the things that go on top of that, maybe accelerate it, maybe help it, but it doesn't change the core. And the core of Mercury is still something that is so pure that I think is really going to be something people love 10 years from now. And that's really what I'm excited to keep building at Mercury.
Fantastic. So startups, they're kind of like a game of like resource allocation. You have like limited resources, limited time, limited money, limited attention, limited energy, and you want to place bets on things that have impact. And when it comes to growth, there's of course like a lot of outlandish ideas you want to try. When do you decide to like say no to something? How do you prioritize things? When do you say no? How do you say no? If you could walk me through a little bit of that.
Yeah. Okay. So my starting point on this is for anything that, I or my teams are executing on, we have to be executing incredibly well. There's no gap and you can't fail because of lack of execution. And so when I or my team set out to go do something, we are going to go do it. We're going to ship it. And we're going to do it within a reasonable time frame to get reasonable understanding of the results of that. We don't build things that are going to take 6 months to go learn if it worked or not very often. Times we do, but most of the time we're trying to find something. What is the thing we could ship in 1 week, 1 month, not much more than that to get to a place where we can know if we're right or not. And so anytime you talk about prioritization, you have to start with, is the execution incredibly strong? Because prioritization is about the cue of what you're working on. But if what you're working on is not going that well, you should just stop what you're working on and go like do the other thing. But through that, you have to execute incredibly well. I heard some great advice once that it's not prioritization unless it hurts. And so we're always thinking about the painful things we're saying no to. And there's a ton of painful things we're saying no to. Things I'm really excited about that I love as ideas, but that we have to crush the things that we have on our plates because we've gone through the process to figure out those are the right bets and we have to really nail them. And the last bit here is I think a ton about the portfolio that we do. It's very hard when you're a small team, you're one person, maybe a couple engineers to have a portfolio. But even in that scenario, what we tried to think about is, 80% high confidence bets, 20%, let's just go fucking let it ride. And so we would, do some crazy things. The demo came out of that and, just some other ideas where you're trying to go really break the model of what works. And then I think as we've scaled up, we try to do that. I think we have about 5 growth teams now. One of those teams is just crazy bets that I can't even really talk about because they're doing things that are so out there that if it works, it's going to be a 10x outcome. If it doesn't work, that's okay. We learned and we tried to go do it. And so you have to have that kind of combination of incredible execution, prioritization that hurts. You really have to say no to things that feel like they're great ideas. And then, some sort of balanced portfolio where you're just making sure you're not only betting on the things that are incremental, high confidence bets, but you're also trying to make sure you have the space to go do something that would change how your entire business operates. And I think through that combination, that's really how we kind of manage that and how we go about it, is trying to kind of run that playbook.
Fantastic. Cool. This is great, Ryan.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for making the time. I feel like I'm generally saying this. I feel like we could keep chatting for another hour.
Yeah. I'll give you a fun WhatsApp story before we go, which is that when I joined WhatsApp, my title was growth marketing, and I went and talked to the main PM at that time, and he was He was like, "Oh, that's funny. Growth and marketing. That's two things WhatsApp hates." I was like, okay, cool, welcome. Like, nice to meet you.